Yeah, no, things are picking up. We're almost at 4,000 subscribers, and I've gotten requests for merch. And I'll tell you where my head is at. My head is for a GetRubix game show. Yeah, think about it. You don't get as many game shows as you used to. And that used to be a big deal, Bob Barker and all that stuff and Family Feud. But, we get some contestants on and we can have, different people win different things. Like you answer questions about the graph or an Intune app, and then, you get prizes, or you try to, maybe their computers, or, something really fun to get everyone involved. Yeah, you're not a fan of game shows? Steve Warner here from GetRubix.com, and welcome to part 3 of our Getting Started with Graph series. And today, so that kind of sounded like a game show host. And I know a lot of folks have been asking about this. So today we're going to talk about how we can start using PowerShell with the Microsoft Graph. Well, what do you mean I can't be the host? Who else would host?
GetRubix, solving for the modern workplace.
Okay, so before we talk about getting started with the PowerShell graph, I want to explain the real benefit of it. So this is one of our graph calls we've been working on, and I gotten some great feedback about this. So probably going to turn this into its own blog so we have a reference. I mean, I'm glad everyone thinks it's helpful. It's what I find helpful. But let's say, I'll give you an example. We want to get a certain Intune device. So this is the device management, all managed devices, and we put in a device ID and we get that device's info. Okay, so we do that, and what does the graph come back with? It comes back with all these attributes. But let's say we're trying to find information that's not necessarily in Intune, but is related to this device. So for example, what if we want information about the Entra device object, right? Well, we can then correlate this. So we can say we just want the Azure AD device ID. So there we go. We pulled it out and we just want the Azure AD device ID. So now what do we do with this ID? So now what I can do with that device ID is I can run a query to say, get me all Entra devices, because remember, Entra starts right after beta. Get me those devices and find the device that matches the device ID of the Azure device ID. Okay, and that returns the Entra ID device object ID. And now I can run a graph call directly to that object ID and get things only in there. And maybe from there, I want to get the user object who's assigned with that. And once I have the user object, I can get the user's licensing information, and so on and so forth. So by using PowerShell, right, we can store things in variables and do correlations between entirely different graph calls, and even eventually build modules to automate these for us. So it definitely opens up our possibilities. When I see a challenge in Intune or Entra, I think, oh, I could get around this with the graph, because all I have to do is get all the data I need and use some simple PowerShell logic to string it together however I need to. So let's start by getting the Microsoft Graph module installed with PowerShell and talking about how to use it. All right, so to get started, like always, you're going to need the right permissions for this. So make sure, if this is your, demo environment, you're a global administrator. If not, work with your admins to get the appropriate access. It'll prompt you for that. So let's zoom in on PowerShell here and let's go through it. Okay, that's good. So just to give you an idea of all the modules available for PowerShell, I'm going to start with a find module. Name is going to be Microsoft Graph. I'm going to put a little star at the end of it. So this will search the repository for everything. And yeah, there are a lot of Microsoft Graph modules. There's Microsoft Graph, beta Windows updates. There's Microsoft Graph. There's an Intune module, Teams module. So you can get specific on things. Generally, we just want to get the whole graph module in so that we have it. But just to show you, if you were working on a different machine and you need something specific, like sometimes for autopilot, I'll just do the Microsoft Graph Intune model so I can have the authenticate, so that I can authenticate in and, add devices, things like that. But yes, let's go down here and let's run install module name Microsoft Graph. So we'll get the full one. Now, if you're not an admin on the machine or you want to limit the privileges, you could just scope to current user. That's fine. I'm going to obviously install it for my whole machine, but that's completely up to you. Yes, we're going to hit A for all, and I've already have it installed, but for you, it would just go ahead and install. Let's clear the screen out. And to make sure you've installed it, you could just do a get module name Microsoft Graph list available, and yep, we have it installed, so we're good to go there. And we want to import it before we start using it. Import module Microsoft Graph. So with the module imported now and installed, it's pretty simple. What do we do with it? So there's actually two ways to work with the graph, and that's what we're going to go over today. One is working with the module and all of its native commandlets, where we don't have to, do all the get requests and filtering that we did in the graph, but we can do that if we want to. So let's start by looking at some of the built-in things we can do. All right, so with the module installed and imported, we're going to hit connect mg graph. This will allow us to connect. You're going to be prompted to sign in. And if you already signed in before, you can just click on your credentials and it should let you right in. If this is the first time, you're going to have to accept some permissions. And if you want to get the context of what you're signed in as, then you can just do get mg context. And you can see who we're signed in as, current user, and all the permissions we have. So there you go. So as far as things we can do with this now, I'll clear the screen again. Let's see if we can get the command for the module. So if I want to just focus on Intune, I'll put microsoft.graph.intune, and these are all the commands I can do. Quite a bit. And if for some reason you wanted to go through them, I would recommend do a pipe and type OGV for out grid view, and this will give you a clear list of all the commands you can do in just the Intune part, right? If we were looking at the identity, get command module, Microsoft Graph, identity, directory management. So OGV, yep, getting service principals, getting direct reports, contacts, users, whole bunch of stuff, right? So that's a good way to kind of see what commands are available. So let's go ahead and run the get mg device management. That's going to basically be Intune, right? So that's just telling us, yep, that's your Intune account ID. Same thing when we do the device management call in graph. So let's add managed device on top of that. And this is all our managed devices. Let's get that in a, there's a lot of data here. Let's do an out grid view to see all of it. Okay, so a lot of information, right, that we're seeing here. We are seeing compliance state, device enrollment, device name. We have email address. Do we have the, sure, we have the OS version here somewhere. Yeah, operating system. So let's do this. Let's pick a few of these, because the same thing we would do in the Graph Explorer we can do here. So I'm going to do device management, and I'm going to select the object, and we are going to choose device name, email address, and operating system. And there we go. We get a much more concise list, much easier to read. So it's, you can kind of add what you want. So if there's anything from there that, let's say you want to also spit out the ID and the compliance state, you would do the same thing and say ID, compliance state, and there you go. All right, so talking about filtering now, we can do the same thing, right? So I'm going to do get mg device management, managed device, where object, let's do the compliance state is equal to non-compliant. So I want all my non-compliant devices. There we go. And then just like we can do in the graph, we can keep adding things. So now I'm going to add another pipe in PowerShell to say select object, and I'm going to bring back the device name, ID, and compliance state. There we go. So now I can see the device name, I can see the device ID if I want to look into it further, and I can see the compliance state, so it did only return non-compliant. So this is pretty cool. Now the fun thing about this is I showed you how to do out grid view, but you can also put these reports in. So let's say I just wanted to get all my devices. So let me kill the where object, and let's just select out here. So I'm also going to put email address. Perfect. So now I got the user. I'm going to take that same query and I am going to, so I'm going to write export CSV, got to give it a path, and I'm just going to put it on my desktop profile. Let's make this a little smaller, desktop, and I'm going to call it compliance report CSV. Let's open that with Excel just to get a good look at it. And there we go. So see, device name, ID, compliance state, email address. So you just got a little report for yourself out of there. So those are just the basics. Obviously, you want to get comfortable with PowerShell. I showed you some of the commands. You can feel free to go see what they all are, play with them, try storing them in variables. You know, one of our members left a great comment and said, the best way to explore these things is to start playing around. And I couldn't agree more. So if you do have a lab environment, yeah, kind of go crazy on it and get familiar. Just keep challenging yourself to try to get to different things. Now that we have PowerShell in the mix, we're going to start, you know, obviously creating more things, and we're going to have the ability to do more based on graph results. Maybe get all users in sales and add a certain property to their entry ID, and then use that property to add something to the Intune device, maybe an assignment. So that's the kind of stuff we're going to get into. And remember, if you want to go a step further in the playlist for all this, you can see some of the videos are in the members channel. Those are more the advanced series. So if you're finding this interesting, join the members channel, and we're going to have more content. So for example, this video today, tomorrow, there's going to be a members only video where we take the concepts from today with PowerShell and we start going further into them. So we'll be seeing you.